I'll just share my video. Can everybody see me?
Yeah, everyone can see the slides and also your video.
Awesome, great. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for taking the time out on Friday. I know the weather's probably really nice out there, and I promise won't keep you more than an hour. Maybe we'll end a little bit earlier than that. But it's good. We have a smaller crowd, so it'd be definitely more interactive. And feel free to stop me along the way during this session. There's a lot of great content that I hope will be useful to the group here, and we can just spend more time learning on certain things that people might find interesting. So you can see my screen. I'll just make it full screen. There we go. And so the session is on product management 101. So just essentially, sharing my experience on product management, what I've learned. It's a really, really amazing field to be in. And so hoping that you find that useful today. So let's get started. There we go. So before we dive into what product management is, I thought maybe I'll just do a bit of background on what I've been doing, how I got here, a little bit about myself. So my name is Anuj. I'm currently a senior product manager at Interac. And I've been in the, working within technology for, I would say, a bit over 15 years. I have changed quite a few roles. Early on in my career, I started off as a developer and then moved across different spaces, and then got into people management and now product management. And so this is where I am today. So let me just share a little bit with you what has happened over the course of the last 20 years, I would say. The last 20 years, I did my computer engineering degree from McMaster, graduated in 2004. And during that time, I also did a one-year internship, which was at Mold Masters, where I was more or less, part of the help desk there, just supporting the staff with all their tech issues. I graduated in 2004, and I got into, because of my experience and I had a good interest towards the tech line. So I got into a consulting company called Interac, and where I was supporting Microsoft on Microsoft's clients on a number of support calls, more specifically related to Active Directory, which is an identity platform for companies that use it to give access to their employees. So I worked there for about a little bit over 2 years. I left that tech support role and I joined SimCore. So SimCore is a company that was actually formed by the banks, and what it did early on, it did all the check processing for the banks and all the statements for a number of, not just the bank's clients, but also some of the bigger clients like Canadian Tire, things like that. So they printed statements, emailed the people. So that was sort of what they brought in this space. And so I joined there in 2006 as an analyst. And what my role there was, I was pretty much working in the operations team and managing about the server farm. So, handling all kinds of support issues with the servers, and even, issues that employees had accessing different servers. So it was a flavor of all kinds of servers. So it was great to get that experience, just working in a data center kind of a role. And then I moved on from SimCore and I joined TD in 2008. And actually, I've been there for about 8 years. So you'll see that I changed a few roles there. So when I joined TD, I joined in a specialist role where I was part of a team that was managing TD's identity platform. So it was consisting of a number of directories and identity systems. And in that role, I worked on some really cool projects, built some in-house solutions to help the employees, built some, I would say, access management solutions to create workflows. So when new employees join the company, How do they get access to what they need? Very much automated. When they change roles, how does that access change with that? So building a lot of the back end needed to support that. And I grew into a team lead role there. It was a team of about 7 or 8 people. And then while I was there, in about late 2013, I felt there was a need to switch a bit more to the business side. I'd been doing technical work for a while, and I wanted to pursue, an MBA just to understand the value that we provide for the end customers. Because sometimes it becomes hard to see that, right? So I started my MBA part-time at Schulich, started in 2013, September, while I continued at TD. And then I changed roles around the same time into a separate team where I still continued the technical path as a solutions designer, creating all kinds of specifications and design documents, getting away from, more of the development aspect of things, but just being in that designer, architect kind of role. And it was around 2014, I would say mid 2014 is when I became a dad for the first time. So my first daughter was born in June. And so that, great experience. And now I was tackling 3 things. I was doing my MBA part-time, working, and of course, the most important thing, my daughter. And so the life was quite busy at that time. While I was there, then I changed roles again at TD, and I went back, and this was a role where I was leading their efforts to bring a lot of their systems onto the cloud. So onto Azure. TD went to Microsoft Azure for a number of their core systems. So their email, their Active Directory, you name it, they had a few systems. So I was leading that effort with a team to bring that onto the cloud. And I stayed at TD until beginning of 2017. That project went really well. Left TD and joined Ontario Health. And this is sort of where my first official role within product started. I was a manager of a product team. The team was consisting mainly of business analysts and project managers. And we were managing their Ontario Health's OneID product, which is their identity product for healthcare workers in Ontario. So all doctors, nurses, pharmacists, pretty much all kinds of healthcare workers would have an account on our system. And there's a lot of services that we integrated with, so they would get access to all those services, obviously based on their roles and all that. So it was a pretty good system. We integrated with the hospitals, got to learn a lot about the healthcare space. But at the same time, I got a great opportunity to help build out a product strategy there, because Ontario Health was just starting off within the product space. And so they had created a whole department, and we were brought in. This team was first created, and we were brought in to help create that strategy, the roadmap. And we'll get into some of that detail later on. But this was a great experience. And then after Ontario Health in 2019, I joined Interac. So that's where I am currently. I'm a senior manager for their digital identity product. So we are looking to roll out, a digital identity solution for Canadians. I won't get into too much of that right now, but I'm helping lead that effort. We've been working on the project for about a bit over 2 years now, and it's been going well. While at Interac, this is where I sort of, went out of the day-to-day and joined some communities and organizations. So first one called DIAC, which is the Digital Identity and Authentication Council of Canada. I joined the group because they're helping build standards and frameworks for digital identity in Canada. And so I joined the group to help, create those standards. So for the last 2 years, I've been an active member, helping bring out some of the frameworks, some of the standards, and even there's a lab that's been created that helps companies that want to certify their solutions. They can come to DIAC, and we have a process to do that for them. While also there, I've also got a certification recently. I got my PMI ACP, which is the Agile Certified Practitioner. And so, it was something that I've been wanting to do for a while. Took a few months to do it. Very much an internal kind of initiative I took on myself. And so I finished that. One thing I forgot to mention, in 2017, actually, I became a dad for the second time. I had a second daughter, and so they're 7 and 4 now. So I did want to bring that up. And last thing, I did join recently the Diversity and Innovation Council. Sorry, not Diversity and Inclusivity Council at Interac. And so I've been an active member there. It's a great opportunity to do things outside of the day-to-day work and help bring a different culture within Interac. So that's a little bit about myself. And if there's any questions, feel free to ask now, and I can move into product management if there are none. Okay, thanks. Oh, last thing I forgot to mention, I'm looking to pursue my CISSP, which is another certification that I hope to get to sometime early next year. Okay, so product management. I know we're, we can't actively vote, but what I was going to do is I'm going to put some pictures on the screen, and maybe in the chat there, I would love for folks to kind of, provide some thoughts. I believe everybody has access to the chat there. So what is a product? And this is one of the definitions that's out there. So something physical or virtual that provides benefit to a segment of the market. So I want you to keep that definition in mind, and I'm going to provide a few screens, and I want to get your thoughts if you think it's a product or it's not a product. And you can just maybe in the chat just say yes or no, and then for each one we'll just take a look at it right after. So first one, hang on. There we go. A pen, or pen with a ballpoint pen. What do you guys think? It's a product or not? Yeah, I'm seeing some responses come through. Yeah. Yes, it is a product. It provides a benefit to part of the market. It's physical in nature, and by itself, you can actually sell a pen, and somebody would be willing to pay money for it. So yes, it is a product. Next one, a website. Any kind of website out there, is it a product? Yeah, it's so I see the responses. Yes, it is a product. Google search engine is probably one big one, but pretty much any website out there, it's reaching a segment of the market. Even if you're not selling anything on site, but it's still a product. Even if you have blogs there that you're getting the traffic on your site, it is still a product. Next one, mobile apps. Yeah, that's an easy one. So definitely a product. And one thing I will mention is, so apps are a product. What do you guys think of widgets? Small widgets that are you find on your phone that sometimes you can just click on to check your weather, for example. What do you think? Is that a product? Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because a widget by itself, if you're in the business of just creating widgets, or if you just create a widget, it's going to be hard to be able to reach the masses, right? So you can argue either way. But if you're in the business of creating a number of widgets, for sure, then you have a product which is about creating widgets. But a widget by itself, it's a tough one. I personally don't think it is, but it could be argued both ways. Microsoft Office, is that a product? Yes, it is. But we want to think of this more as a suite of products. because it is so big. And sometimes when products get that big, you can sell them at that, or you can actually sell individual pieces within it. So Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel. So people would actually buy those individual products. They don't necessarily have to buy Office, but Office is also a product. Next one, a service that the airlines provide to transport people from one point to the other. Is that a product? I see a number of no's there. Yeah, it's a tough one, but it would be a product because it's if you think at it from the airline's perspective, it's a service to us, but it's a product to them that they're putting out in the market. It's a benefit to the market. It's not physical, but all pieces of that end-to-end service would make up the product of you being able to get to one place. So it is a service, that you can see it as, but it's really a product for the airline industry. And last one, a few lines of code. Is that a product? Yeah, for sure. So this is definitely not a product by itself, unless the few lines of code becomes part of an algorithm that you can patent or you can sell that has a lot of value. Sure, then I could see it as a product, but just a few lines by themselves, not a product. Okay, let's go to the next page. What is an MVP? So that's a picture of the NBA most valuable player, Nikola Jokic. I think that's how I pronounce his name. But so he was the MVP for the last season. But that's not what I'm alluding to. An MVP is a minimum viable product, and there's a definition for it right there. It's a version of the product that is not complete. It's at a place where it's good enough that you can validate it, and you can get a lot of feedback from the customers, but it's something that probably is not your end state. It has some basic features that give it the function that it needs, but it's not complete. So let's understand this a bit better. So, when MVP is a term you'll hear all the time, and pretty much all kinds of solutions that come out there, there's an MVP that's created first. So the way the whole process works is, you're working at a problem. So every time anything you want to put out there, it's got to solve a problem. And if it doesn't, it's not going to be successful. So let's say the problem is, customers have nothing to sit on while working. So now you got to come up with a solution, figure out what can help people, do their job. So first is identifying the problem, putting yourself in as part of the user to understand their needs. What are they looking for? You come up with an idea, block of wood. Maybe they can sit on that, and that could work. But when you think about it more, it's not close to an MVP. It's an idea, but it needs more than that for somebody to be able to use it, right? And something that you can sell out there. So you do a lot of iterations, figure out what can be done, and you come up with a chair. And chair will work. People will use it because it provides benefit to the market, and it's at a stage that you can iterate further on it. It's not your end product, but it's at a stage that you can sell in the market, get a lot of feedback on it, and then move further. So then maybe your end product is that. It's a high-tech armchair, but you only get there by getting a lot of feedback from people, what they're looking for. But you can't get there unless you have an MVP. So that's sort of a process that we follow. Another example, and this is an example about a company called Zappos. I don't know if you've heard of that company. So they are the #1 shoe retailer in US. And they started off to solve a problem what they found online, this is now, I'd say about 15 years ago, people wanted to, where online was taken off and people were purchasing a lot of products, but people wanted to try on some of the things that they purchased before they purchased them. So there was a big problem where customers had a need. How can they try on shoes online and not just purchase it and then they have to go back and return it? And so Zappos co-founder, so he came up with the idea saying, why don't we bring the store to the customer? But how do we do that? How do we bring that store to their homes so they can go through the process? So the MVP was an online site with pictures. So what he did was he went to a lot of the shoe stores in the area. He actually snapped pictures of their products, of their shoes. Of course, he had an agreement with the shoe owners. And he put those pictures on his site. He set up a call center, which was just a few people at that time. And when people came to his site and they liked the shoe and they said they wanted to purchase, he had a shopping cart there. They could click on the item and purchase. And at that time, he would actually go to the store and purchase that item and take it to people's house and deliver it there. So people could actually purchase maybe about 10 pairs of shoes, and they could try on what they wanted, and what they didn't want, he'd actually return those back to the stores himself. And the call center was set up to help people make these decisions. And so this idea kind of took off, and people just, his site exploded, and people just started doing more and more sales through his site. And I think it was in I can't remember the year, I think it was 2009, I can't believe, or 10. He sold his business to Amazon for $1.5 billion. And the business is the #1 online e-commerce shoe store. So, think about the MVP, what he started with and where it is now. And now, of course, that online returns are pretty easy. People do that all the time, but at that time it was a unique idea. So just wanted to walk you through a couple of examples on how, what the process is, how do you get there? And you don't need to have an end product in your mind early on. You just need to be able to iterate. Okay, let's go further. So what is product management then? So product management is a definition there, but really it's a role that is at the center of a lot of things. So in this case, when it comes to product, there's 3 things to it: the why, the how, and the what. The why is the business. They have business objectives that they want to achieve. So that's why they're going into this space. The how is how are we going to achieve those business objectives, but what is the most important here is what it is that we're trying to build. And this is where you need to understand the customer really well. So you understand their needs, their pain points before you can meet the objectives and deliver on a solution. So the product manager role actually sits right in the middle of all that. So they have to understand the customer really well. They have to understand what the company objectives are so they can align to that, and then create the requirements that they need. The how is usually the technology or the development team that does it, and the product manager will not be the one hands-on doing that, but they still should know how it's built. So in a nutshell, this is where the product manager sits, and they need to be able to create a product that meets all these different needs. Let's drill down a little bit deeper. So here is another view of it. The product manager sits again in the middle, and what you see around are different stakeholders that they work with pretty much on a daily basis. And so let's walk through each one of the things. So customer, we actually kind of just talked a little bit about it. So customer is understanding, the customer themselves. How do we acquire them? Whether it's businesses, whether it's users that would be wanting to use our product, whether their needs, having a feedback loop. So we do lots of interviews, user research to understand them better and provide the ongoing support that we need. And so this is very, very important because there's no point building a product that doesn't resonate with the customers. So you build, you test, it's a big loop that you go back with. So customer is very important in all of this. The next area that the product manager works very closely with is the design team. So, once you kind of know what the needs are for the customer, you do a lot of research, and, you start creating wireframes, UX designs, what that is. Again, the product manager would probably not be the one to create the UX. You'd have a UX designer within the company, but you work very, very closely with them. So you can explain to them what you're looking to do. You have very good insight on the user needs, the flows that they need, and the designer would help you bring that flow that you have in mind into something that's, a little bit more realistic, wireframes and prototypes and all that stuff. So you work very closely with that team. And then once all of that is kind of figured out at an early stage, then you go into working with the engineering team. And this is where the technical pieces come in. And you work closely with them because now you have requirements that you need to be able to clearly articulate to them. There's different ways to capture these requirements, and we'll get into that a little bit. But it's about having clear requirements that the engineering team understands. Sometimes product managers even get as far as creating system designs or system analysis or doing specs for the engineering team. But really, it should be enough to guide the engineering team on what it is that you need. Again, not the how, but what it is that you need, because you kind of leave the how to the engineering team to do. Another big stakeholder is the executives. So you work very regularly with the executives, and very, very important part of the role, because you are working almost weekly with them to ensure that their strategies align with what you're building. There's a lot of regular cadence back to them, a lot of presentations you have to give to them to ensure that what you're providing is in line. So there's a lot of feedback you're going to get from the executives. So there's the whole concept of stakeholder management. You have to know how to manage them well. And this is one of the greatest experience I think I've had in this role. Resource planning is a huge part of it, because the executives have to have the buy-in in what you're doing so that you can get more resources on the projects if you need. The next space, which is probably not as important, but still part of the role, is working with legal. So, ensuring that you have the agreements in place for the different partners or clients that you would have. Maybe you have other vendors that are helping build your solutions. So you need to have those agreements in place. And you as a product manager need to know what everybody's kind of doing. What are they signing off on, at least from the requirements perspective. The legal team would create the documents themselves, but you have a role to play in helping creating those agreements. Sales, and this is another role that, again, you come to as you grow into your role, and it's a role that where you'll have direct access to customers, and you provide a lot of sales support. So whether it's technical pre-sales, so this is where you're an expert at of the product that you're bringing, and you're brought in to be able to sell the product, bring out what the capabilities are. A lot of thought leadership here. So content creation online is part of this role as well. And RFP, so these are contracts that are issued. So part of this role is also selling, meaning that you reply to the contracts that are coming out there, so to help being able to pitch your product. So this is part of a role, again, not a day-to-day, but it does come with the role. And the last one of the other important ones is business. So you're working with the business team regularly, understanding what their objectives are. Any product has got to have a business case attached to it. What that means is being able to ensure that you're going to be able to estimate some projections, some revenue that you'll be able to generate from it, and being able to bring that business case and present it and get the executive and the business sign off on it. And so that's part of the role that's definitely more on the financial side. Product managers themselves may not be as actively involved in creating business cases, but they work with the finance team and provide a lot of their estimates and projections and building that out. And again, the other part of that is when you have a product, bringing it to the market. So working very closely with the business team and even the marketing team to help bring that product out. So some of the key roles here, responsibilities that you do day to day. So you'll see it's a spider web of things. But it's as a product manager, you get the opportunity to be at the center of all that and work with all the different teams, so which is pretty cool. So here's another view. This is actually part of I took a snapshot of one of my weeks, and I thought I'll share that. And one of the big things in pretty much any product role is a daily stand-up that happens. Daily stand-up is part of the core team, so not necessarily everybody. You won't have executives there, but you'd have the core team that are part of the product daily. So apart from the product manager, you'll have the development team, you'll have the project manager, which is also the Scrum master in this case, and they meet daily to understand if there's any blockers, what went well, what everybody's working on, so people have time to share. It's usually a quick stand-up, 15 to 30 minutes daily. The items in blue there, actually, let me finish the green stuff. So then apart from that, I have meetings regularly. So planning the sprints. So sprints are typically 1 to 2 weeks. They can be up to 4 weeks. So sprints are what the development team is working on during that time frame. So you identify sort of the requirements or the features that they'll be working on within that time. And you have a planning meeting at the beginning of a sprint, and you go through the different things that are in the backlog, and you pick out the items that the team will work on. A technical alignment meeting is, again, it's more of a technical meeting. The product owner may or may not come there, but it's just if there's any technical issues that are being raised. And so, it's a meeting to bring those to surface. And a demo is usually held maybe on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, again, at the end of a sprint on what's been completed at that sprint. So that's a session that happens bi-weekly. The other things in blue there are, again, part of the product work. These are more working sessions, I would call them. So, maybe you're working on Jira as a platform to be able to take your requirements and put them in tickets that can be assigned to the development team. So, maybe spending time to review the tickets that are there. You're doing time to review RFPs. So again, this is part of the sales part of the role where contracts have come and you're reviewing an opportunity that you want to respond to. Market research, design review, risk reviews. These are all kinds of sessions that you'd have regularly during the week to work maybe by yourself or with a small group. And then the other pieces, which I would say are, other product related meetings, which are more important, is, this market planning session that I had that week. Program steering meeting is usually held once a week or once every 2 weeks. And this is where you actually have the executives, where you give like a regular update to them so they're aware of what's happening. And then, potentially there's meetings with the vendor that you need to meet on. There's issues that have been raised or things that they're working on. And then stuff in yellow is kind of external, maybe non-product related stuff that you have. But this was a bit of a snapshot of the meetings and sessions that I had during that week. I thought I'll share that with the group. Let's talk a bit more about the skills here. So we talked about the responsibilities, but let's break that down into a little bit more skills that, that teams look for in a product manager. Process mindset, this I would say is very, very important. And this is all about how you work within the organization. So lots of processes are out there that you can follow, lots of agile frameworks, but again, you need to tailor them to the organization that you're working for. Which process help the best here to create a product lifecycle? How are the cross-functional teams set up so that you can be more efficient? Do you have a dedicated team? Are the teams using any of the existing methods? Do you have to introduce new methods? So this is all about having that mindset so you can bring processes or make them more efficient so that the teams can work really well. So that's a bit about that. Business and strategy is sort of the other place where there's a lot of good skills that are needed. So this is where it's all about ensuring that your product aligns with the business and the strategy there, right? So ensuring that business cases are created, like I kind of mentioned. Ensure that you have a champion for your product. So champion is typically an executive who can go to bat for you. They're fully bought in. So anytime there's issues, they can raise them and they can support you at different levels as needed. So you got to be a good negotiator. You got to ensure that you're very good at communication. So lots of presentations, being able to tell good stories, being able to have good pitches ready. What is your product doing? What value it brings, and all that. So, internal, external, this is where you're going to develop that skill. The third one, which I would say is the core of a product manager, is working with the design and engineering team. So you have your product requirements that are created, and there's different formats that a company is using. Traditional formats in a Word document to using things like Jira, where you create tickets and bring those requirements in more user-based stories, which I find are a lot more useful. Or a company could do a bit of both. So the goal here is to ensure that you have clear requirements that are created and shared with the team. And this is where you'll have skills to work with all kinds of tools that are used within the frameworks that the company is using, whether it's, like I said, Jira, Confluence. They may have tools for sprint planning, retros, design thinking like Miro and all that stuff. So there's lots of tools that the team might be using, or opportunity to introduce new tools to really bring these kind of requirements so that there's clarity on how we can manage them. Part of the role is also the UX UI piece, which I kind of mentioned earlier. And the last piece is, it's very important, I think, to know how the product is working. What is definitely the most important part, but knowing how it works at a bit more of a technological level is very, very important. So that as you grow in your career within this space, you're able to speak well about the product, not just the value it brings, but how it's built. Domain knowledge is probably another piece for it, where you need to have good skills there. Market research, understanding what's happening in the environment, doing all kinds of analysis, SWOT analysis, pest analysis, understanding user trends, technology trends, so what's in the market. So what you're building, there's some value that it brings that is not necessarily out there. Understanding who your competitors are. So all of this requires tons of research, and so it's a big part of the role that you want to learn about, gain new skills on. And lastly is problem solving, probably one of the more important skills. When problems arise, how do you solve them? Whether it's resource related, technical problems, you may not be a technical expert, but providing the guidance from the product side really helps solve those problems. Removing roadblocks, retros, which are held at the end of a cycle of a sprint. People may bring up problems that they encounter during that sprint, but you being able to bring those and understanding and doing a good analysis on those. So those are some of the skills I think you'd want to learn on and you'll actually gain as part of the role. Next slide, let's talk a bit about the Scrum framework. So this is probably one of the more common ones used out there. And as a product owner, your roles are obviously managing all the stakeholders, bringing the requirements to the team, as I mentioned, and those requirements are pretty much brought in a form of a backlog. So you have a product backlog that lists those requirements as features, maybe as stories, and then you go through the efforts of prioritizing them. And this is another big exercise that I won't get into, but there's ways to prioritize them, essentially, whether it's from the value perspective, cost benefit perspective, different ways to rank them. But you have the responsibility to rank those requirements and then share them with the team. And this is what's shared in the sprint planning meeting. So the team gets a list of all the requirements, and a session happens where those requirements are further broken down into tasks that the team needs to do. The product owner may not be part of this session or may be brought in as an optional member, but it's really the development team and the Scrum owner that works together to break those requirements down into tasks. And then you create a backlog out of it. And then a loop process starts where those sprints are actioned, all those things that were identified that would be delivered as part of this sprint are carried on. The team works to complete them. And when they are created, then a review happens and a final approval is provided to see, yep, everything is great. Product owner is actually involved there to find for the final approval, and the team moves on to the next sprint cycle. And you'll see every day there's a daily Scrum meeting, which is the stand-up I was referring to. So all issues are brought forward, everybody participates, and so that this is the loop that we go through to quickly deliver on items as you're building the product out. So I just want to take a few more minutes and then leave time for questions. So this is a bit more on the careers within the product management space. And so, you typically start off as an associate PM and work your way up. The things in parentheses there is sort of the experience that, they're looking for, but obviously it could be less depending on how quickly you can learn and grow. So associate PM, senior PM, director, VP, and a chief product officer. Again, some companies won't have some of these roles, but some companies definitely will that are more product driven. And then the function, or I would say the experience that they're looking for. So as an associate PM, first role that you're getting into, a lot of your job will be around the product function. So as a product owner, helping the product owner, writing stories, UX, all that piece, communication, which is the presentations part of it, and collaboration, potentially running meetings and helping lead some of the sessions. As a PM, you take on more responsibility. You're doing a lot more research, working with the legal team more regularly, ensuring that those contracts are in place. And then when you get to a senior PM, you're more involved in the business strategy of things, helping the sales team, market planning, helping how the product can go to market. But the one thing where you may not have at that level is still people management. That comes in the later roles where you actually, you have a team that you're leading directly. You'll still have people management roles in a senior PM capacity in a more cross-functional role. So you'll a team that you're leading to build out the product, but you may not have direct reports. So this is essentially sort of, I just wanted to give you a view into what the career looks like and the path to it. And the last slide that I will share is some resources. And I know this deck will be shared, so I won't get into all of them, but some good books out there. Definitely would suggest The Lean Startup, was the first book that I read. Amazing book. It talks a lot about how do you create an MVP? How do you have that mindset? Different ways to hypothesize, creating sort of a value-based MVP where you're attracting just the early adopters to a growth-based hypothesis where how do you take that and scale it now? And then you have a lean product playbook, which is again very good one. Same kind of concept, but it introduces new processes in place. So those two I would recommend. There's a podcast, a really good one if you want to follow, and a few blogs that are there that I also put at the bottom. And these are hyperlinks, so you can click on them and it'll take you to the sites. A couple of good certifications in this space. One I did recently was the PMI ACP. It's very much, it's more, a lot of content in this certification because it doesn't just talk about one Agile Scrum methodology. It talks about a number of them. It talks about the role very, very holistically. So you get good insight into the role. You learn a lot about different processes, a lot of different tools that you learn about. So I would recommend that one. There's another one, the CSM, Scrum Master, which is very much focused on the Scrum framework, which I just kind of touched on. You can become a Scrum Master, but it doesn't have the breadth that some of the other ones have. But a good one, a quicker one that you can get. And then some of the other ones are, Product School has their own certification, and there's a few good communities and groups that I highlighted there that you could join. A lot of people actively participating there. And the last thing is the interview prep. So as you prepare for interviews, a few things that I did want to highlight there is whatever role you're going for, know the product. Obviously know the company, but know the products that they have. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Read the reviews about them. What's being said out there? So as you go in, you have a lot of insight. Learn about the interviewers, right? So people that are going to be interviewing you, their backgrounds, how they got there, look them up on LinkedIn. They actually encourage that. So learn about them. So then you can have great conversation during the interview. Practice with prep questions. So you're going to find different kinds of questions that are thrown at you. Some of the questions are very much product specific, and some of these are asked by big tech players like the Googles and the Amazons. But the questions, there's a link there about the PM exercises that you can go to learn about these kinds of questions. And the thing about these questions is they're not asking for solutions. They're asking for how you'd approach a problem. So for example, you might have a question on how do you measure the success of a feature within a product. So they're not asking you to give you the right answer, but how do you go about, thinking about that? Or how do you improve Google Maps? That's a pretty common question. So think about it. So the PM exercises there and the circles framework, those are some really good tools that teach you how to break down these kinds of problems into ways to give an answer. And how do you do that? So something I would suggest to look up on. And last thing is have questions to ask the interviewers. And so, from all the research that you would have done about the company, you would have good questions to ask, but even ask about the role. So some general tips there, but also links to some frameworks that, please read up on those. And there's a book there if you have time, Cracking the PM Interview. It's a good book, but just something to read up on. I think that's the last slide I had. And then here's my LinkedIn. If you wanna, connect with me, if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to reach out anytime. But I did want to leave some time. So there's about 12 minutes for questions. So let's open the floor. If there's anything that anybody wants to ask.
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves or type in the chat, and I guess Anuj can just answer your questions right away.
I didn't think the presentation was that good, guys. But if there's anything, oh, there we go. Okay. What is your favorite product that you've worked on? I would actually say it's the one I'm working on right now. It's bringing out a digital identity solution for Interac. Interac is primarily a payments company, and so you think of Interac as somebody who's providing the debit network for all your debit cards, and that's what they do. But it's been pretty cool to join them and help bring out a digital ID product. And digital identity, if you don't know what it is, it's essentially think of ways to be able to take your identity and digitize it. So whether it's your driver's licenses, any kind of identity documents, your student cards, anything that can be digitized on your phone, put in an Apple Wallet, and then you can use that ID as a way to share that information with any service that you're looking to get access to. So whether it's filling any forms that you need, opening a bank account, so you need to share some of that information, you can do that directly from your phone and share that. So that's the kind of product that I'm working on, and super excited to bring that to the market. Yeah, for sure. I think there's a big need for something like this. So and things are moving. I think especially with the COVID, the pandemic over the last couple of years, there's been a bit more of a need to have products that help support remote kind of transactions. So I think there's a big need for it as well. Yeah, so in the future, for now I'm enjoying the product space, and I see myself within this space for definitely a little while. I do want to move up this ladder, and I want to be able to learn and be able to share a lot of the information out there, like a session today. I like to give back, so I want to do that. But at the same time, I want to grow and have maybe a few products in a portfolio to help manage. But I'm, the more I look at it, the more I'm getting interested in products that bring real value for people. It's something that that's I'm resonating with at the moment. So maybe not products that are more focused to businesses, but that bring real value to people's everyday lives. So I am hoping to work in spaces, whether going back to healthcare again, or staying in the financial industry, where you can create products that help bring that value, that help people's everyday lives. Any other questions? What is the motto or advice that's driven you to get to where you are today? That's a good question. I think so. It's when I started off in my career, for the most part, I was, like I said, I was very much in a technical space, and I enjoyed that. But where I found, where I was having a lot of gaps was I couldn't understand the value that working that space we could bring to people. And so at that time, I reached out to a number of people to get some advice. And I recall, so one of my mentors earlier on, and so that's another advice I would say is have some mentors to be able to just reach out from time to time, so that they can give you some advice to move forward, and anything you want to have. So I had a mentor early on, and I was struggling with what to do next. I didn't know, and this is where she kind of mentioned to me that this is not the end all, right? So there's a whole side of things that where you're missing is you want to be able to reach and reach your customers, and you'll actually find there's a lot more value there, and you'll find just because you're able to reach them and resonate with them and understand their pain points, you'll find that you're more happy in your job. And I kind of took that advice and I said, let me explore this space. And so I, since then, I kind of shifted my work completely, and that's been resonating with me. And that's something I'll definitely mention is when you're working with people, and you're able to help some of their problems, you feel you have achieved a lot more. So that's the advice I'll give as well.
Any other questions? If not, then I guess we're going to be wrapping up this workshop. As Anuj said, his LinkedIn is on the screen, so if you do want to connect with him that way, I think he'd be open to that. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone for showing up, and especially to Anuj for hosting this really wonderful workshop on product management. And yeah, have a great evening, guys.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions or you just want to connect.
Mm-hmm.